everybody. We've got a very fun episode for you today, so prepare yourself for the Teen Study Bible Study. If you've been listening to the episodes before this, you knew that this could happen, and it's happened. But with that being said, we have adults and children of all ages and maturity levels who listen to this show. And everybody's responsible for making their own decisions. We do a lot of talking about sexual intercourse in this episode. Certainly nothing that wouldn't be in a church service. We keep it clean. It's all good. But, that's what the whole episode's about. So make your own decisions, or make the decisions for those that you are legally allowed to make them for. And here we go.
The world is complex, the Bible is complex. Human existence is a tangled ball of experience, perception, and understanding. Ravel is a puzzling word, denoting both a tangling and untangling. This podcast attempts to hold honest conversations in good faith. Some ideas expressed in this podcast will be challenging. Others will be obvious. When a PhD in biblical interpretation and a habitually podcasting man-child discuss matters of society, scripture, and scandal, you get Ravel.
You are listening to Ravel, and it's me, your best buddy Basil, and with me, as always, the backwards hat-wearing, folding chair-straddling, cool youth pastor who totally gets you teens. It's Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates. What's up?
What's up, dog?
What's up? Cool.
I was a little bit nervous about which direction you were going to go with the introduction there, because there were two possible choices for this episode.
Yes, of course, we have the Teen Study Bible, but also SEKS. And was I going to find some sexual-related words to describe Chris? Not on this episode. I'm saving that for not the teen sex episode, for the adult sex episode.
I am very glad to hear that. People might be confused, though, about what's even taking place right now, because this will be the first installment in what we hope will be kind of a series that we will pepper throughout all the others.
Yes. Unlike our other series, we are not planning on doing consecutive episodes visiting the Teen Study Bible, which I believe it was our Easter episode, right? That we had.
No, I think it was the last asked and not answered, and we were talking about Bible versions, and somehow the Teen Study Bible came up.
The best version, which is the teens, not just the Teen Study Bible. First, produced and printed in 93, but also the Extreme Teen Bible. These were two different Bibles, and we will be visiting both of them. Because they were formative texts in both of, not only just our childhood and our rearing, our Christian rearing, but also, formative, foundational texts to our walk with the Lord. And it's really, I'm excited. I think it's an interesting idea just for us. I hope other people get something out of it. Of course, there will be a mix of listeners. Some may remember the Teen Study Bible and the Extreme Teen Study Bible. Perhaps they grew up with that as well, but there's definitely going to be a large portion of people who, were either not of the age of the Teen Study Bible in the early 90s, or perhaps just, came to the Lord later on in life. This is very, in the biz, Chris, they call this narrow casting. Have you heard this term?
No, but I think I know what it means, but please tell me so I don't have to guess.
There's no official definition, but it's basically the idea of like doing a podcast on something so specific and so niche that it is completely unrelatable by the general population of podcast listeners. But I don't think, that's from a different time. That was some early podcast lingo. And the world is such now that really the only way to podcast is to narrowcast. And so for some people listening to this, they will be stricken by really a diabolical disease that is so rampant these days, especially among millennials, and that disease is nostalgia. And for those, and for others, they're getting an interesting window, and hopefully a valuable window, a peek into some ancient text that was so formative in an entire generation of millennial Christians in the early 90s. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it also, just to let everybody know, I mean, we kind of were just like, what are we going to talk about? And had joked about doing a series on it, but then I went ahead and ordered the Bible on Amazon because I found one for like $13, which, by the way, previously belonged to Lindsay Fogeron. Fogeron? Her name is here.
Okay, I'm not sure if we need to...
Well, I'm going to try
Lindsay.
to find her. I'm going to try to find her. So,
okay.
If she's perhaps there's notes in here from her mother. There's like a nice little oak leaf that's like stuck between some of the pages.
Oh gosh.
There's a little like brochure or something from her youth group that seems like she was a part of out in California somewhere. So, Lindsay, if you're out there listening, I have your Bible here with me. Yeah, so
I will say this, Chris. I was originally cringing at the idea that we were speaking the name of the former owner of this Bible. You never know. The idea of you tracking this person down was certainly presents a very fine line between what is acceptable and legal to do.
Well, I already found somebody with the same name on Facebook too, and sent them a message.
But I do know that your heart's in the right place, and I like that. And I'm thinking now, if I had my extreme teen study Bible floating out there in the world, and it got picked up by a fairly new podcast, but with a fairly established history of listenership of one of the hosts and an impressive resume of education and experience by the other host. I would like that very much.
Yeah.
But I am also a weirdo. So I can't guarantee that Lindsay will like that, but I hope she does.
Yeah.
Have you checked just to make sure that Lindsay wasn't the actual person that you bought it from? On the Amazon store.
No, I mean it's penciled in the cover with a girl's handwriting. Looks like a teenage girl's handwriting, so it's kind of a little bit bubbly.
So you're thinking that this was sort of maybe in a giant pile of teen study Bibles after a church replaced them with the Extreme Teen Study Bible in '98, and
perhaps
maybe you don't think it was Lindsay who actually sold it to you.
Chances are it probably got left in I'm going to put her around the same age as, myself, yourself in mid to late 30s area. So she's probably now a grown,
early 30s,
now grown and probably has her own, maybe family and house, and maybe it just got left behind somewhere and was picked up by book collectors. And, people, sometimes you can take piles of books in and get a couple dollars a piece for them, and then people just turn around and sell them for this one I bought for about $15 or whatever. So I think it probably just got lost somewhere. I always love, because I buy lots of used books because it's cheaper, and there's always names in them and little notes, and it's always fascinating to kind of look through, like somebody else's, especially Bibles too, to see where they've underlined and notes they've made and things that were important to them. So it's really cool. But I I lost mine somewhere along the way, which is why I had to buy another one. So if anybody out there has mine, please reach out. I would love to have it back. I'll buy it from
That
you.
would be that's an interesting idea for like a website or a sort of online marketplace, or maybe even a whole social media network of people, connecting by, current owners and previous owners of teen study Bibles specifically. But I guess we could widen that out, use
That is
books, connecting people
A
throughout time.
very
and space.
narrow cast.
Yeah, that's the world we live in now, man. You can't try to be too broadly appealing, or else you're just like everyone else.
Yes.
And, so there we go. That's what we're doing, folks. Now, for those who maybe missed our discussion about the Teen Study Bible, and again, the Extreme Teen Study Bible, 2 different publications. This was a Bible. Do you know what translation they use on that Bible?
It's almost certainly the NIV.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So this is an NIV Bible that was originally published in 1993, I think we discovered.
Zondervan, yes.
By Zondervan, yes. They did a great, more or less just a marketing scheme to sell Bibles to teens. But it peppered throughout the NIV Bible were little extra full color, in the early 90s, very well designed sort of prompts, study prompts that would present problems. It would try its very hardest to relate to the teen experience and sort of guide the teen through perhaps, what to be thinking about as they read the Bible, what questions to be asking, it really is, a valuable idea. What was your experience? Since this is the Teen Study Bible, the OG, this was more of your primary text, right? I came about to the Teen Study Bible in the Extreme Teen Study Bible days, but tell me about your experience with this holy book.
Yeah, so this one actually, the one that I have commandeered here, belonged to my older brother. I had it was actually the one I had was the Youth Walk Devotional Bible.
You mean when you were a kid? It was your
when
brother's.
when I was a kid. So my father bought us both Bibles the same year for Christmas. My brother got the Teen Study Bible, the one that we will be looking at here, and I had the Youth Walk Devotional Bible. That was the one that I had. But both of them, I couldn't find one of those, at least not in a hardback. I'm not going to pay money. There was a paperback out there, but I'm not paying money for a paperback. If I can find a hardback, I'll buy that, and we can add it to our to the series here. But both of them had, as you were talking about, kind of these full color inserts on thicker paper than the Bible, so it was real easy as you're just kind of leafing through it real quick to find them. And then they would have all of these hot button sorts of issues related to the teenage experience, at least in the 90s. And then they would have these little kind of little proverbial sayings in there. They'd have some scripture that tied to that topic. And to be perfectly honest with you, while I appreciated my Bible for the fact that it was a Bible, I was really drawn to all of the time these pages, with the little hot button issues on them, and I would spend some time, reading through those. And
they're certainly appealing. They're eye-catching for sure. Especially in the sort of early 90s, very colorful, very sort of abstract.
Got that MTV
shapes,
vibe for sure.
But like a Christian version of the
MTV
vibe, which is notoriously sort of alternative quality. It included. Now you sent me just a couple of pictures because mine has not arrived in the mail yet, and the topics, of course, you'll find are still important for teens today, but back then especially we had topics like self-image and entertainment. How do we think about entertainment as teens, biblical teens? Money, and of course, sex. The fun detail is sex is the very first leaflet in this book, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Which I just find so appropriate for a teen study Bible.
And it doesn't seem to be, positioned here in the Bible in any intentional way other than that it is first, but it's sandwiched between Judges 9 and Judges 10, so there's not really any relevant passages around.
Threw it in there in Judges, arguably the least sexy book of the Bible. And
I've heard some stories about it was Ehud and Eglon, actually, that there was some kind of weird homosexual thing that might have been going on there. But we'll save that for another episode. But yes, and usually mostly devoid of sex. Well, I mean, Samson and Delilah, you have
okay.
It's kind of saucy.
There's something there. There is. I mean, it's even more funny and sort of out of place because it does quote a couple of scriptures on the leaflet, the page, the thing, the prompt page. But it is referencing Genesis 1:27 through 28, and another one in Genesis that is cut off because of the picture that you sent me. What is that second one? Still Genesis.
Genesis 2:23 to 24.
Yeah.
I think I sent another one that has it's better framed.
All right, I'll take a better look.
But being that it is the first insert, and then they're citing Genesis, maybe throw it up a little closer to the beginning there. But either way,
I was wondering, why not put it in Genesis? But it doesn't matter. I am not the professional Bible publisher, so.
No, nor am I.
Okay. Well, so there you go. We've got, it almost feels like we must make these images available somehow for people to take a look at. So we'll probably either post them on our Instagram, or maybe I'll kind of work it into the episode art for these episodes, because these are the Teen Study Bible Study episodes, and they should be a little bit more flashy to represent the subject matter.
I agree.
Again, primary texts. So may I kind of take an exploration for the listeners on what exactly this page includes?
Oh, please do, yes.
Okay. So in big, sort of like that 70s show lettering at the top, it says sex in humongous letters, and there's sort of rays of polka dot sunshine coming off of it, as if to give the impression, first of all, that it is not a bad thing inherently. Okay, so that's good.
Exciting, even.
Yeah, exciting, yeah, right. And hearkening to the 70s, which... Yeah,
yes.
Okay. I guess
Sexual revolution.
Yeah. And by the way, we didn't... Part of what we're going to be exploring, this is going to be a little bit of a loosey-goosey episode, folks. But we will be digging into a couple of things. Our personal experiences with how these texts, the Teen Study Bible, kind of what they meant to us, how they... affected us, our experience growing up as young evangelical Christians in America with these as our sort of primary influence, and maybe comparing that to, our job here is not to just totally, destroy this Teen Study Bible. There is certainly a lot to make fun of, but that's not what we're here for.
Well, such is the nature of the passage of time. When this came out in 93, I'm sure that it was very effective, that it was kind of even cutting edge in a lot of ways, and it was an effective approach for teenagers, regarding some of these issues and things like that, and probably very engaging for them. But as time goes on, and this is one of the things that, as we were talking about doing this, it's interesting to look at how we talked about issues 30 years ago as opposed to how we talk about them today. And this, of course, works with everything, even with fashion and all of those sorts of things. You look back at pictures and it's really easy to kind of look and scoff and like even sneer sometimes, like, oh my goodness, like what were they thinking? Of course, fashion seems to always come back around eventually. But yeah, it's not, I think what you're getting at is we're not trying to poke fun, but naturally there's going to be.
This is not a roast. This is not a roast of the Teen Study Bible. But there's also, explorations of like, well, how, culturally, how were Christian teens being communicated to, and the word choices, the things like this. I don't know. We'll get into it. We'll discover it together, folks. Okay, so we've got the big sex page here, and it says this. This is sort of the intro. Is all sex considered a sin? Why should you wait? Can you do everything but? What's so bad about it if you love the person and have protection? Does the Bible say anything to teens about sex? Oh, that's an interesting one at the end there. Does the Bible say anything to teens about sex? As if, hey, teen, we know that the Bible has all sorts of stuff, but is there anything specifically written to you, dear teen, about sex? Now,
what's really kind of interesting, and will kind of, it leads into this whole kind of discussion, and we were just having this talk last night in my New Testament survey class. I don't know exactly how it came up, and I don't think I've talked about it in the show, but it's like teenage or adolescence, it's like really a modern sort of creation, this thing about adolescence. And it goes back to, as I understand history on this matter, it goes back to kind of like the World War II, post-World War II era, where you had, specifically in the United States of America, you had most of our young men of fighting age, being around 18, being shipped off to war for, a few years there. And then the jobs all opened up. Of course, you had, the women entering into the workforce. This is where you get that iconic kind of poster of the woman there. I don't know her name, but she's got the bandana
Rosie
on.
the Riveter.
That's it. Thank you. I knew you would know it. Whatever it was, We Can Do It, or whatever it was. I was thinking of Yes We Can, but I think that was some other famous person. That all transpired there when the men went out to the workforce. But then after the war, all these men come back. And now you have these men needing to get back into the workforce. And actually what you had was this kind of oversaturation of workers. And it is, as I understand it, what happened was it was in that time that they started taking young men in particular and women who were girls or whatever, who were coming out of school, out of high school as it was. I think it was up to 12th grade at that point too. So somewhere around, 17, 18 years old. And now they're supposed to be entering into the workforce, but they can't enter into the workforce because there's no jobs. And this is when really there was a push for everyone to go into college. And then it was like, well, if we can just keep everybody in school for a few more years, we'll create some more jobs. But then, of course, that never happened. And then college becomes this thing that like you have to do in order to get a job, because before that they were just training people for trades and things like that in school. They used to teach things in schools like how to trades for entrepreneurs, like how to manage a spreadsheet and how to manage people and do things that you would need to open a business. And then it started moving into like, let's just teach people these rote sort of skills. Anyway, this is getting really long, but the fact of the matter is that adolescence is a recent creation. It was almost like this little buffer zone that was created with these people where they were like at an age where it was like, we don't really know what to do with them. Whereas if you go back into ancient history, and not even ancient history, but sometimes just other cultures around the world, there were always these rites of passage where you would always have, and for the Jewish culture, it's the bar mitzvah, right? So when a young Jewish boy turning 13, he has his bar mitzvah, and he goes overnight from being considered by his family and by his community a boy to overnight he is now a man. and he's expected to act like a man. He's expected to be responsible like a man, to get a job, to be looking out for other people, to be responsible, to be able to care for a family and those sorts of things. And they have this rite of passage where one day you're a boy, next day you're a man. And you have this in other, cultures too, the vision quests and things like that happen where they send the young boy out, and when you come back, you are now officially a man. In Western culture, we lost this idea a long time ago, and there actually now is no point anywhere where you can say definitively that you have gone from being a boy to being a man. We would say legally that that's when you turn 18, but right. That's not really any kind of rite of passage. And then, of course,
you're talking
even
sort of like broadly culturally accepted, because certainly there are still bar mitzvahs and things like that in subcultures.
Yeah.
And things in America, and perhaps it changes family to family or whatever. But yeah, as far as like the broad mass popular culture, there is no generally accepted idea of when the transfer happens.
Right. So when it talks about, and this is just a long roundabout way of saying that when this question here is asking, like you had pointed out, does the Bible say anything to teens about sex? Well, the answer there's no. It doesn't, because it doesn't talk about it in any terms that are different from another. It is in a biblical setting and in a biblical context. They're talking about sex only between men and women, and of course, like I had said, going back, men and women, and a lot of this has to do with pubescence too. Anyway, so by the time you're even getting to the place where you're even thinking about sex and even like able to, in without getting too far into detail here, you already are considered a man. So to answer the question of this Bible, which this is another one of the things that it's kind of like they're trying to be relevant, but also it's like you can just leave that question out. Like it doesn't really. It's the teen study Bible, so the
like
question has to be addressed to
13-year-old, given sort of the average age of puberty, a 13-year-old could count as a man in the context
Precisely.
of the Bible. Yeah.
And this actually also comes to bear on some of where we're at in society right now with a lot of the sexual frustration and tension that we see in adolescents as we have come to understand them, because as many people know, like it was not uncommon for people have speculated, particularly about Mary, the mother of Jesus, Joseph and Mary, that she could have been as young as 12 or 13 years old, right? As soon as a girl starts menstruating, then it's like you're okay, you're no longer a girl, now you're a woman, and that kind of still is a rite of passage to some degree, but it's not really, nobody really talks about it. It's not really spoken about, but you become a woman at that point. And men, honestly, people will talk about, Joseph perhaps being older in his 30s or something like that. It's not really probably that's the case there, but maybe a little bit older, but probably still even in his, teenage years. But this comes to bear on the fact that when sexual promiscuity and all of those different things, it's a struggle for teenagers and young adults now, because we're not talking about marriage usually for people until they're getting into their at least late teens. Like you have to at least get out of high school and then maybe even college. So you're talking about 22, 24 sometimes before people are even considering marriage. Meanwhile, your body has entered into this state of kind of adulthood way back 10 years ago when you were somewhere around 13 or 14. And it didn't used to be that you had to wait 10 years to become married and then start being able to gratify some of your, sexual desires that you had outside of, you're being tempted to do this outside of the confines of marriage. But in the past, in the ancient world, it was usually as soon as your body was ready to start doing these things, then you were ready to enter into those kinds of relationships. And then there's the whole conversation that people have about maturity. People are as, immature as we allow them to be. And children tend to rise to the level of expectation that's provided for them. And if you're going to, baby them and not expect anything of them, then they will go around and be helpless and not do anything for themselves. But if you set a level of expectation, then it's very very easy for a 13, 14, 15-year-old to be very responsible, to be hardworking, to be able to actually earn an income. I'm not saying that these things necessarily should be happening, but I'm just saying that this is the way that it happened, in the ancient world. So it's kind of all of that comes to bear, even just like the age range there as we start talking about these things, when you're talking about it in a modern day sense versus a biblical era sort of sense.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. In the context of, trying to make an engaging, prompt for teens within the Bible, I could see how it is a useful thing to personalize it like that. One of the things with this leaflet, and maybe there's a backside of the page, it asks a lot of questions. It does not really answer any of them. Yeah. There's no answer page, right?
No, there's not. Not that I know in the back. It's just a...
Which makes it even that much more baffling to me that they don't put the leaflet in a part of the Bible that would answer this question, perhaps.
Yeah, it is actually quite interesting. I was thinking that too. I was like, these are some great questions that I'm sure are on the minds of these teenagers, and you didn't answer any of them.
There's no guidance. There's no index. What is on the opposite side of the page?
It's just another similar page about money.
Oh, okay. So it's just another prompt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that actually explains a lot, because I can certainly say that I don't think all these questions were answered as easily as one might think, having them explicitly addressed in a special, very colorful page.
It's kind of, the surrounding, kind of information, a couple Bible verses and a couple things that they have to say loosely answer it, but they provide there a definition at the top, which...
which already now, 30 years later, would make for maybe a little bit extra conversation in today's, teen culture. Yeah. And yes, so they have a definition up here. It says sex. And then they, have the pronunciation guide, like any dictionary. And the pronunciation guide is spelled SEKS, which is probably how I'm going to spell it from now on. Maybe that's how I'm going to spell it in the title of this episode. Noun. The first definition.
There interestingly is the word actually, sex, is a noun and not a verb. And when we think of sex, most often we're thinking about it as a verb. But
I don't know about that, but I'm not going to get pedantic about it.
I do, so I'll at least throw it out there myself. I usually, when I hear it, I'm thinking about the verb and not the noun. Is it
really a verb? Like, you don't use it as a verb. To have is a verb, but I think the sex part is not the verb.
Yes. Okay. I'll concede that, but I'm thinking about it as the action of doing, whereas it is actually etymologically from the word sect, which is SECT, which is a division of a group. A sect is a particular division, and sects, plural, multiple divisions of people. That is actually where the word sex comes from. It is how we divide the human race into male and female. They are two sects, if you will. And that's where sex came from. And it is actually, yes, as you kind of even just said, when you're talking about the act, the verb, if you will, it is sexual intercourse, which is, of course, that's being more specific, but colloquially, it has come to sex actually can be the action and not just the division of people. But that's just a little bit of etymology there for fun for folks.
You could almost say that the SEX spelling is almost like a transliteration of SECTS.
Yes, precisely.
Whoa, that blows my mind.
Yep, there you have it. Fun fact for the day.
Yeah. All right. Well, the first
Oh,
definition...
we need our Webster's dictionary.
No, we don't, because the Teen Study Bible gives us the definition. And the first definition is male or female.
Oh,
that is it. That is the full definition that they give, is male or female, which, of course, already in today's world and teen culture would be a cancelable offense, or at least one for discussion. It would be probably more of a discussion today within a youth group classroom than it would have been in 93. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And it is.
But this is the Bible, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's becoming, it's like really one of those things where, people are shying away from talking about it with any real amount of clarity at all. I think that, yes, to say that there are, as we're talking genders here, that there are only two genders, it is quite controversial anymore. But
yeah.
I mean,
well,
this
of course, gender and sex are two different things. One is a biological thing, the other one is a cultural construction of roles and things, and we get that. It's not what we're getting into here, folks.
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny because one of the passages that they have here on the page is from Genesis 1:27, and it says, "So God created them, male and female. He created them." And it's like, who knew besides the Lord that verse would ever be so poignant, that it would ever have so much impact. It's kind of like for so long we have just read that and been like, well, yes, of course.
Or be so relevant in a time such as this.
Right. Yeah, of course God made them male and female, but now it's like not anymore. That's not even just agreed upon by everyone. Like we can't even all agree at that.
Well, you know what's interesting? If we're talking about the Teen Study Bible then and what a Teen Study Bible would look like now, certainly they put Genesis 1:27 and 28. So God created, and there's ellipses here. This is a paraphrasion. So God created male and female. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful." Certainly, in 93, this was to sort of make the point for heterosexuality. Or at least establish that here on the prompt page. Whereas nowadays, that really isn't even I don't think that would be the top of mind concern when this scripture would be read. Nowadays, now you actually are talking about categorizations of male and female, and it's not like in 93 it would be, so God created male and female to get that is the combination that we're shooting here for, folks. Whereas today it would be like male and female. Individually, those are the categorizations that you could inhabit for this biblical, this scriptural reference for what kinds of people there are. Versus, does that make sense? In 93, they were shooting. I feel like it was more about like a case for heterosexual relations, versus coming off of the 80s sort of birdcage type conversations. All right.
Well, get into the second part of that definition there, and then it will kind of lend itself a little more to that point you were just making.
And here we go. The second definition given is the sexual urge or instinct or sexual desire as it shows itself in behavior.
Yeah.
And then they give an alternate definition. This is the very special, exclusive Teen Study Bible definition of sex. It says here, alternate definition. Another fun thing mean adults tell teenagers to keep away from. Ooh, teens.
Yeah.
Mean adults.
Yeah. It seems that there was, I don't know, it just made me, that just made me think of the Loveline show that used to be on MTV. Did you ever
Sure.
watch that? With
No, but I'm aware.
yeah, Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew, and they'd take phone calls from teenagers asking questions about sex, that they couldn't ask their parents or anybody because they were afraid to do it. But it was like this in the 90s. It seemed like there was this intentional pitting of, adults against teenagers, and I don't see that so much anymore. It's kind of interesting. It might have just been a cultural phenomenon there in the 90s where it was like, oh, parents are so annoying, and you just got this all the time, that same sort of message. But I don't see it much anymore. But of course, I'm not a teenager. I was a teenager in the 90s, so maybe I was paying more attention to it. But anyhow, yes, the alternate definition is that it is, another fun thing to do.
A fun thing mean adults tell teenagers to keep away from.
Well, of course, nobody is going to say that it's not a fun thing to do because it surely is. And then this kind of brings up, coming back to what you were talking about before, kind of the purpose of sex. And, when you talk about it from a biblical perspective, you have, again, going back to Genesis 1 there, so God created them, male and female, he created them, and he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And of course, there is a command given, to make more human beings. And of course, the only way that we can make more human beings, at least for a long period of time, now we have all kinds of IVF and different kinds of technologies and things like that where we're making human beings without the actual act of sexual intercourse. But for the long history of humanity, it was always through that act. So God gives a command, and one of the purposes of sex is to perpetuate the human race. But there is also the purpose of sex that God gave to humanity, where it is for pleasure. Mm-hmm. It is for fun. It is for intimacy. It is for a man and a woman to have some of the deepest and greatest sensations, both physically and emotionally, to be shared within the confines of marriage. And it is a gift, as I have heard it talked about many times by many teachers and preachers, that it is a gift that God has given to mankind in a way so that we might, enjoy one another in this very, very special and unique way, which is in biblical context reserved for marriage and marriage alone. So yes, a teenager could say it's this really fun thing to do, where I would say yes it is, that mean adults tell me to keep away from, and I would say, well, if you're not married, then you should. So I kind of agree with the Teen Study Bible alternate definition.
Yeah, well, I'm glad they added it, because I wouldn't know anything about that, Chris. Now, it goes on to this next section here, and it says, God invented sex, which is, okay, cool. So we're getting some positivity here. God invented sex.
Do they have any proof, though?
Now, I want to be clear. This whole next section, I want to be extremely clear that I am very uncomfortable reading this on a public forum. I think that there's some word choices and things that... I probably wouldn't use or repeat on air for the whole world to hear. But much like many other episodes of this podcast and others, I am committed to putting myself in uncomfortable situations for the good of the show and for the good of the listeners. So
I hope your mom's not listening.
Hold on, let me close my door. Mom, don't come in here, okay? I'm doing a podcast. Okay. Don't come in. All right. Here we go.
Gosh.
It goes
I
like
meant
this.
to the episode after it was released. I wasn't accusing you of living in your mother's house.
Can you make me some pizza rolls? Yeah, just leave them outside. No, leave them outside the door. Don't come in. Okay, here we go. And it goes like this. God invented sex. He designed the hormones that trigger your desires. He designed every nerve ending that magnifies pleasure. Sex isn't wrong. Sex is good. A gift from a God who loves you. Very nice. It's really that middle part that just kind of gets me.
It is
every nerve ending that magnifies pleasure.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the positivity here. And looking back on at least what my general messaging I received as a teen in this era, not a whole lot of positivity. Here and there, the recognition that it was a gift and not to be sort of ashamed of necessarily, but to be responsible with. Like you would want to be responsible with any gift that you receive.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate right there in black and orange, as it were, on this page, the positivity. Because that is one thing that really makes me cringe when it comes to people like talking about the church or talking about Christianity. And maybe they had a bad experience or maybe they have no experience and they kind of just gleaned this from popular culture. The idea that Christianity regards sex as a bad thing, which has really never been the case. I'm not going to say that the church does not regard that the church does not deserve its criticism for the things it deserves, and certainly it's a big wide net to be cast, and I'm sure there's lots of Christian churches or groups that maybe framed sex as an entirely bad thing. But I do appreciate the Teen Study Bible here on the Teen Study Bible Study, the positivity, bringing to the noun here. What did this mean to you?
Well, it is. I mean, it is kind of a It's the first time you read it off air, it was even a little like cringy, and then I was like, oh, we have to read this, to everyone too. So I'm glad that you bit the bullet there on that one for us. But
I'll always jump on that grenade for you, Chris.
Thanks, buddy. It is a reasonable point to bring up and to consider that. It's the same thing like when you think about eating, it's like we must eat in order to, give fuel to our bodies and, whatever, moisture to our bodies and all of those things so that we can continue to grow and live and have energy and all of those different things. But on top of eating, we also have taste buds, in our tongue. And it's like eating becomes extremely pleasurable.
Those
there are
nerve endings they were talking about. Right?
Yeah. Millions of different flavors of foods, and all this kind of variety that we get to actually eating becomes this extremely enjoyable. Who doesn't love something that tastes very delicious? Now, the purpose of it seems the primary purpose is to sustain our lives, but then there's just this extra little benefit that God throws in there where he's like, well, this is also I'm going to make it pleasurable too. I'm going to make this taste really good so you actually enjoy this thing. And with the same thing with sex, it's like, the command there, going back again to Genesis, is to procreate. And this is what it's for. This is how you're going to make more human beings. I made the two of you, and I'm leaving it up to you guys to make the whole rest of the human population. So it could have just been very easily, like two people, a handshake or something. God could have chosen any way for humans to have reproduced. But
did you ever see Avatar?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that would have been an interesting way for God to do it. If you haven't seen Avatar, everybody,
link your braids together.
The big blue people from what is their
Pandora.
Pandora, right? Ooh.
Yeah.
They have these long braids in their hair that go down to their buttocks or lower back. And I don't know if this is procreative, actually, now that I think about it, but they touch their little braids together and these little tentacles kind of splay out and connect, and it's so romantic and beautiful.
I always took that as more of like the kind of mental and emotional connection, because they do it with the animals too. So if that is
Indeed.
sexual in nature, then we have a
Well,
lot of bestiality going on.
It did make it weird. It was a weird aspect. It was but it was supposed to be that brain connection.
Yeah, and then they can connect with the earth too. I mean, it's a very interesting sort of premise, that James Cameron puts out there in that movie. Lots to jump into there.
James Cameron, sort of notorious Hollywood Christian man.
Known very much for his Christian ideas.
Yeah.
But it the end result, the primary end result of sexual intercourse seems to be in God's plan, for procreation. That is kind of what it seems that he has given it to us for. But just like eating and all of those other things, he said, I mean, you could just do this and it could just be a thing that you do and then you make a baby. But
as a gift.
Yeah, I'm so good that I'm going to actually make this an incredible experience for you. And, really too, because it kind of like helps to have us make babies, because sometimes
when things are fun, it's better to mix work and play.
Absolutely.
And God knew that.
Yes. If you love your work, you never work a day in your life, they say. So,
if you like what you do, you never work a day in the world.
Yeah.
So I'd like to kind of review the scope of what's happened so far on this thing.
Yeah, please.
So, you've got questions about sex.
Unanswered.
Questions, yes, that are unanswered, and also there's no instructions.
Hey, it kind of follows our.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Are we the teen study Bible of podcasting?
We're Ravel, the teen study Bible of podcasts. That is definitely going to go on some marketing material soon. So you start out with questions. No real answers, no way to find those real answers, but just an opportunity to pontificate. Then you've got some definitions, which, we do that on this show all the time.
Oh my gosh.
Ravel is the teen study Bible. But then there's the alternate definition, which is sort of put into you could tell it's some editor at Zondervan trying to what do teens want to hear right now? How can I connect with the teens? The alternate definition, another fun thing me and adults can tell teenagers to keep away from. I mean, we give alternate definitions on this show too, man. This is getting pretty close. And then we have the positivity, God invented sex, intertwined with some pretty uncomfortable descriptions for me to read on the air, which again is a core principle of this podcast.
Yeah.
Me doing uncomfortable things for me and also uncomfortable things for the listeners.
That's true.
But overall, it's really this, again, it's meant to just spur interest in maybe exploring the Bible for yourself. Is that what it's doing here? It's kind of giving you some questions, giving you some definitions, giving you some positivity, and then just saying go figure it out, man.
Yeah. I think perhaps that was their motive. We had talked about kind of trying not to bash the thing, but it's really when they lay out all of these questions, and they're really, good questions for consideration, and some that I'm sure a lot of teenagers in the 90s and even now think about. How are you going to put the questions there and not give them any kind of direction at all? It's kind of...
See, here's the beautiful part about us saying we're not here to roast the Teen Study Bible, is that every criticism that we could have about the Teen Study Bible can literally be applied to this podcast. So I think we're okay to roast it, as long as we're keeping in mind that we are really, the Teen Study Bible is holding up a mirror to our own strategies for content creation.
It seems like a wonderful time to add in the fact too that we had a listener send an email who said that our opening jingle reminded him of some kind of 90s dating show jingle, which I could not see the corollary there myself, but it's just one more evidence. One more evidence, right. Perhaps.
All this is, I think this entire show is evidence to the fact that our generation, was extremely influenced by the Teen Study Bible. I mean, we're basically recreating the Teen Study Bible experience in our 30s with a new technology called podcasting.
I just found it because it's easy to search the emails, but I've listened intently. This is from ML Cook. Mm-hmm. I've listened intently to each episode, and you gentlemen have sparked deep thoughts and feelings for every episode. Thank you.
Like the Teen Study Bible.
Yes. Heck, the opening music reminds me of the 90s Love Jam shows. So there you have it.
Gotta look that up.
Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah. Okay, let me continue with this. So now what is I'm going to read now is sort of the largest block of text. If you will, sort of the main event.
This is their take on the subject.
Yeah. Hot takes. Again, another thing we do on this show. And it goes like this. And ties in really well to what you were discussing earlier. And it goes like this. Physical hunger can be, Physical hunger can easily be satisfied by eating some food. However, the sex drive isn't like hunger, and intercourse isn't a ham sandwich.
Oh my gosh.
Sex isn't just physical, it's spiritual too. Intercourse isn't a ham sandwich is like literally a title to one of our podcast episodes.
Oh no!
It might be the title to this one.
I'm refraining from so much right now.
It
Please,
isn't a ham sandwich, Chris. I do take a little bit of umbrage with the comparison of hunger as just physical, but sex being physical and spiritual. Mm-hmm. I think that hunger and eating is also spiritual, but that's neither here nor there.
I agree.
God's design for sex is very specific. One man with one woman within the legal bonds of marriage. How special. Okay, let me stop right there. I thought, and I mentioned this when we first read through it, the legal bonds of marriage was a very interesting and, again, very specific choice of words. Because I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't have a plan for whatever happened after because. But I think it is very specific because, of course, in our world today, marriage is a legal institution. It is an institution supported by the full authority and monopoly of violence by the government, is recognized, is enforced, is all these things. By the sort of bureaucratic monstrosity that is our modern governments. Now, maybe you have some answers for me. My sort of understanding of the ancient world was that they didn't necessarily work on the same rule of law that we do now. The idea of, at least in sort of the ancient Israelite tribal structure, what was marriage a legal bond in the same way that we could consider it now? It kind of my instinct, I guess, is to compare it more to like a cultural bond or a spiritual bond or a bond supported by the community, but not necessarily enforced by the law. Well, that doesn't even really work very well.
Well,
I
think
it is kind of enforced by the law, but just in a different way.
I think the one of the places to start recognizing the distinction that you're talking about is between government and sort of, society or the community. And today, marriage has become something that is it is legitimized by the government, right? So marriage is something that must be recognized by the state in order for it to be official. Whereas, and that kind of plays into a bunch of different opinions that I have about marriage and even homosexual marriage and things like that, where it's like, if the state is the one who is superintending and putting their stamp of approval on marriage, then and we are, as individuals, gaining privileges, those sorts of things, whatever, tax exemptions, and even talking about visitation rights and all those different rights that come to spouses and things like that are falling under this governmental legal system, then it's almost like you can't even come at marriage in a Western sort of civilization entirely from a biblical sort of perspective, which this might, infuriate a lot of people that I'm saying something like this. But the fact of the matter is, if marriage is a government institution, which in our society it has become, then it's really kind of like we don't have a whole lot of claim to say necessarily how it's defined or whatever. If, on the other hand, it is, as you were talking about, in a biblical sort of context, if it is a spiritual sort of covenant, and if it is one that is not only performed between two people, but also with God, and if it is something that it is contractual, so it is legal in a sense, right? There are, dowries that are paid and those sorts of things, and agreements made between families, those sorts of things. It becomes legal and it is binding, but it is something, kind of the distinction I think that you were kind of getting at, which is appropriate, is that in the ancient world, it was upheld by the community rather than by any kind of government. So that's kind of the difference where we're at today.
Centralized authority being a government, and a community as a whole being a little bit more of like a decentralized authority, in that every member of the community sort of independently verifies and verifies the marriage and upholds the record thereof.
Exactly. And there are
this
even
one, like, you're not married unless your county has a piece of paper in a filing cabinet with your name on it.
Exactly.
Kind of a weird thing when you boil it down, in a bond that is sort of the God being the glue between two people, in sort of the more, I don't know about romantic, but sort of the spiritual sense of marriage. You make a commitment to one another in front of your family's friends who uphold it sort of on earth, and God who upholds it in sort of a spiritual sense. When I read this here and they say the legal bonds of marriage, it makes me cringe a little bit at the idea that the Bible would sort of uphold, recommend, and enforce this idea that your names have to be on a piece of paper, stamped by a notary in a filing cabinet at your county's courthouse before God will allow you to procreate, or at least have fun trying. But I think maybe now I am being a little pedantic. So
well, anyway. It is there is something very interesting about the idea of marriage, that comes along with that, and you do wonder what are the biblical standards and qualifications for marriage, because you may have heard, in whatever, some of your history classes or things like that in school, I know that I have, about like slaves here, even in the United States of America, and they, of course, were not permitted to get married, but as they're growing up, in these on these, farms and things like that, where they're all being kept in slave houses, and, they develop relationships with people and they decide they want to get married, they would have, ceremonies there amongst themselves where two people would pledge their, lives to each other, and they would be recognized.
It was not legal.
It
legal
was not
to the earthly.
To the earthly powers, yes, but the community recognized, these people's pledge to each other. They did it before God, and that's why, in the traditional marriage ceremony, I just had the wonderful opportunity to officiate a wedding for a dear friend of mine, a family friend. The whole family is my friend, and it's always wonderful. I usually still start with the very traditional kind of dearly beloved. We're gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses, and that is always kind of that's really who's validating the marriage. It's really God and the witnesses. And you have the same sort of thing that happened with the Jews, when they were in the concentration camps and things like that. And they would have marriages that would take place there within the concentration camps where they would get to, and of course there they probably had some guy who was a rabbi, who was there too, who kind of oversaw the thing. But the fact of the matter is, yes, the government didn't have anything to do with it whatsoever. It was something that the community saw, that they witnessed, and that they upheld. So I think that you're not wrong in having a qualm with the legal language that's there in the teen study Bible description of
all right, good.
marriage.
I got to remember this also was written for teens, and teens always looking for loopholes to the system, man.
Yeah.
So I can see how maybe that needed to be pointed out. Okay, it continues. With more questions to be answered, and they do a wonderful job of sort of answering the question in the form of another question. How special do you want sex to be with the person you marry? How much do you want to be one with him or her instead of 5 or 18 or 33? Whoa, bro.
Yikes.
This, well, let me finish it out and then I'll comment. It's easy to say, I love you, but only I do says you're really one for always. And they end with a little heart, the sentence there. But only I do says you're really one. Okay, so marriage makes you one. I get it. It's easy to say, I love you. Yeah, that's true. That can be a manipulative way of that whole experience as a teen. So I agree with the sentiment or with the sort of desired end result. Now, I will say in the context of sort of sexual purity culture, which now as an older person, I have much less qualms with how it was presented because I understand more now how difficult it is to communicate values in a way that really drive home maybe sort of a broader spiritual concept. But this idea of how much do you want to be one with him or her instead of 5 or 18 or 33. And I remember
33.
Yeah, well, of course, there's 33 in there, which is, yes, very fun. I remember in, I don't know, youth group sermons or conversations or counseling or whatever, what is the right word? Not parable, but I guess the sermon illustration of saving yourself. Like one very poignant one was like, there's a heart. We had a paper heart. The youth pastor would hold up a paper heart and they'd say, this is your heart. And every person that you have sex with or kiss or give yourself to in one way or another, gets a little piece of your heart. And then the youth pastor would tear off a little piece of the heart and then go fluttering down to the ground. And this is your boyfriend or girlfriend in high school that you gave yourself to on prom night. And tear off a bigger chunk of the heart and let it flutter down. And over and over and over this would happen, sort of illustrating the number of people that you are intimate with. And it was leaving your heart tattered and torn and damaged on the floor. And it was this very, at the time, sort of powerful image of, participating in intercourse. It wasn't always intercourse, actually, too. There's those kind of the anything but aspect of the sermon. And it was just this image of like you're damaging yourself, and the implication was like your heart is not whole, and you are not worth as much as you were before. And when you finally meet the person that God has for you, would you rather give them an intact heart that has nothing torn off of it, or would you rather give them a pile of scraps that's worthless and they might not love you or something?
Yeah.
Like, I get the point, and I'm not here to kind of wage some sort of war on early 90s youth group sermon illustrations. But it was pretty intense looking back on it. This idea that, like, in a belief system in Christianity and in the reality of how Christ makes things whole, the idea that we, I don't know, can become so damaged and give ourselves away and tear our heart up, and when we finally meet the person God has for us, that we're nothing but a lump of scraps a pile of scraps of heart pieces, and you are basically worth less to your future husband or wife, was not really the greatest way to do that, I don't think.
No. I saw one that was similar to that. Kind of two examples here, and then I think I would like to address all of them. But I saw one where I was a youth pastor for a while, and was at a church that had a school. And my first year that I was gone, after I left there and went on to New Orleans for seminary, they brought in this guest speaker, and he did this whole shtick about sexual purity, and he was going to do this grand illustration this one particular Wednesday. I ended up watching this, online because I was far away, and he brings in this wedding dress, and he has it hanging there on, a hanger on like a coat rack or whatever down in the front of the auditorium. And, all the kids come in, and he starts talking about, weddings and the importance of them and romance and all of these different things. And then he starts talking about, sex, and he pulls out, these mustard and ketchup containers and starts like spraying them all over the dress and getting it all stained up or whatever. And like, this is his big point, is that you have this, the purity of the white wedding dress is meant to symbolize whatever, your purity and all of these things. And then, is this is what you look like, coming down the aisle on the inside, whatever your outside looks like or whatever. And I'm just like,
unfortunately,
dude,
particularly sort of gendered example.
Yes, I was going to say that too. It's like always geared towards the ladies, right, on this still somehow. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, bro, like, you're missing the entire point of the gospel here. I hope that you have some OxyClean or something hidden in your pocket, and you're going to pour it over this thing and restore it to like a perfect white dress.
Right.
You're basically telling predominantly all of these girls in here, any of them who have crossed any sorts of lines with any boyfriends, whether because they wanted to or whether because they got pressured into it in these different situations, that they are now stained for the rest of their lives. And like you were saying in that illustration, a piece of their heart, is gone. They're
relatively permanent. Oh, and this was another part of the heart thing, was that, and it is, now that I'm thinking about it, this is so bad. Again, going back to like the whole reason of Jesus and the renewing and the reconciliation and the making whole and the healing and the things like that are so important. he then took pieces of tape and was taping the heart back together. And his point was like, this is Jesus. He can tape your heart back together. But see, it'll never be perfect. It's not, it's covered in tape now. And there's little gaps. And I'm like, thinking now, I'm like, whoa, that was like an illustration on like how like Jesus will try his best, but you'll never be the same. Like there's no going
You're
back.
even too damaged for Jesus.
There's a sort of permanence to this state that, Jesus will try his best, but there'll always be something wrong.
Yeah. And it was Matt Chandler, and I remember he had a video that went viral, 10 or 15 years ago, where he brought some girl with him to this outreach event when he was a teenager. I don't think he was romantically interested in her or whatever, but he knew that she was there, and he knew actually that she had been, promiscuous.
Mm-hmm.
But he brings her to this thing, and the guest speaker gets up there, and his illustration was he takes this rose and talks about how beautiful it is and smells it, and then he hands it to somebody and tells everybody to pass it around the whole auditorium, and then everybody's passing it around. Of course, in those events, it starts to get damaged, and it's kind of, stems broken and petals are falling off and all of this stuff. And then, he holds it up, and his big point is, this is you, is this what you want to be? And Matt Chandler sitting there, with this girl. And then he says, as he's recounting the story, he said, who would want this? The guy holds up the flower and says, who would want this? And then, of course, Matt Chandler makes the excellent point that Jesus wants the rose. Jesus wants it. And this guy never got to that place in his talk. And the guy with the wedding dress that I watched never got to that place. They leave it without the hope of the gospel. And I understand the angle that they're working. It's like, if we can, let's keep kids away from damaging themselves, because it does produce any kind of emotional damage. There's obviously risks of sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy, those sorts of things, your self-worth. And that's one of the things too, like with girls, usually your self-worth tends to go down a little bit the more people that you have had intercourse with. At least in my personal experience, that's the way that it has been.
Especially if you're being told on Sunday morning that you're becoming damaged. And
whereas with guys, they tend to I think there's a certain amount of shame, but guys at least can kind of brag about it. It's always cool, for some reason for guys to have a high count, and it's always kind of like trashy, for girls to have
even in
a high count
sense,
or whatever. Yes. But
at least back in the 90s. As I understand it now, it's leveled out a little bit. But
Probably has anymore. But the point is, yes, we want to keep not just teenagers, but we want to keep everybody away from making poor decisions for themselves. Mm-hmm. But the way to do it is not to just tell you that you're going to irrevocably damage yourself. God, not even God can fix it. And that is completely contrary to the point, is that God can. Now, it's going to require a lot of work, and anybody who knows, who's been, sexually involved with a number of people, however many that number is, if it's more than one, you understand that there are connections made, soul ties made, as people will talk about. There are, it's hard to recover from being connected with somebody in that way. So yes, we do want people to avoid it, but the way to get them to avoid it is not to tell them you'll never be the same again, you'll never be whole again, because it's completely contrary to the gospel. And I wonder, all of these people who are preaching these things, do you believe that God can heal people at all? Do you believe in physical healing? Do you believe that God, heals cancer and all of these different things? Does he set people back into good health in a physical sense, in a mental and an emotional sense? And he can certainly do the same thing for us with our sexual purity. And I'm not, again, people don't want to teach this probably because they think, well, then kids are just going to go out and have sex and then just pray for forgiveness or whatever. Well, that's a completely different issue altogether. But the fact of the matter is that any of us, when we stumble, he takes our filthy garments and he makes them white as snow, and that includes all of your sexual sin too. So yeah, it is kind of, I hope that those kind of talks aren't still happening out there for teenagers and stuff, because it really just makes my stomach turn, that it's like, this is what you want to tell people.
And
You've stained yourself forever.
I don't think it works either, is the issue. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it stalls the process a little bit, as personal shame and fear does. But I'm not convinced that those types of teachings really work in the way that they. And that is not to say that they shouldn't try. It is, again, in my older age, I am painfully aware at how difficult it is to teach things in a way that will stick and be meaningful. But I like to think that there is more of an inspiring way to encourage people to make good decisions in their lives, rather than the idea that they'll become irrevocably damaged in a way that even Jesus can't OxyClean out or tape together back perfectly.
Oh, he'll scotch tape you back together, but that's the best he can do. It's like, get out of here, dude.
Yeah.
I hate it. Just drives me nuts.
It's a lot. So that's a nice little example of, I think, how we have changed from our teen study Bible days. And I think that's honestly something, it's hard for me, and I think it's hard for us to get, to get too specific about where we've landed versus someone who hasn't been in the church for 30 years and also in church 30 years. We haven't been in. Oh, we've been in the church for 30 years or more, and been in church leadership and gone to, formal Christian education and this and that. So we certainly have our own special situation that not everybody gets to have, but there you go. That's our feeling about it. So back to the text here. How much do you want to be one with him or her instead of 5 or 18 or 33?
Oh my gosh.
Ooh, it's easy to say I love you, but only I do says you're really one for always. And even that is a little bit of a hard one to support, because 50% of marriages end in divorce, and that number is even higher for Christians, at least at last count. So, I do does not always say for always, but, that is another another topic. I don't know if it's something for us to necessarily have any value to add to the conversation, but, in church, there's plenty of people getting divorced, and, sometimes these people are like 45 years old or older or younger or whatever, grown people with full lives of experience, sometimes many children. And I have been in situations where a grown woman gets divorced for even for biblically sanctioned reasons, but it happens even for not biblically sanctioned reasons. It just what happens when adults decide that's what they want to do. And then there's an in-between period of, finding someone new and dating and things like that. And there was a moment, and I quickly extricated myself from the conversation, where this divorced person was in between husbands, and there was a talk going on about their sexual activity in between husbands and needing to go back and get married with this person that they were seeing at the time, which did eventually become their second husband. But I was just extremely uncomfortable with the idea of telling this 45-year-old woman what she can and can't do. It probably wasn't my place, which is why I did a great job of pulling the ripcord and getting torn out of the room by the very special sort of SEAL Team 6 style winch system that I constructed in the church building to get me out of situations I didn't want to be in.
I need one of those.
Yeah. It's useful. But it's funny because it's like, this is in the teen study Bible, but is there like a midlife study Bible? Is that just called the Bible? And why do we not have fun inserts like this to guide people through a life experience?
Yeah. Yeah. What was your, pro advice at the end of that for the
For
woman in
that.
that
Oh, I
situation?
got out of there, man. I didn't.
You just
That's not my
you didn't
job.
even attempt it?
No, I had some very important business I had to address. There was other leaders who were much more equipped to handle that situation.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
look, church leaders out there, I know there are some of them. You need to have, it's important, I believe, for church leaders to know what things they are equipped to handle and what things they are not. Because often, especially as a young church leader, like I was at the time, uh, there's either an assumption of self that I can handle every situation and to have authority to speak into every situation or
Mm-hmm.
give an answer. And there are times when the person, the whatever, congregant, whatever, I don't like that kind of talk about it. They're a person. And they think or they want to think that you have the answer to their question, even though you're 20 years their senior and have had almost no life advice that they can that you can relate
Yeah.
to their
Yeah.
situation. Certainly, the Holy Spirit can take over in that event, but yes, I was leaving it to the more senior leaders, mainly because just because of the things that I said.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
What would you say, dear Chris? I mean, they were standing in a church. We could have just married them right there. That would
Yeah.
have made it
Well,
easy.
it's it's interesting because I have a lot of, you can talk about it from all different kinds of angles, but we had a gentleman who, came to a church that I was at, happened to be preaching that Sunday. He happened to get saved that Sunday. And he happened to be living with his girlfriend for, many, many years or whatever. And then, after, he got saved, he immediately started feeling convicted about the fact that he was living with his girlfriend. And he, said, like, we're not having sex, anymore until we get married. And he just made, that kind of commitment. And I bring that up simply to say that it's like, I understand it's different and people go through all different kinds of life experiences, but like the truth is still the truth, and the Lord should still, if he is Lord of your life and Lord of your heart, should still be convicting everyone, about the ministry of the Holy Spirit to convict the world of sin and righteousness. And he should be convicting everybody of sin. And there is no excuse. And it's, sometimes you have to have those hard conversations with people or whatever. And, you just have to say, really sorry about your divorce and whatever, or your remarriage or the difficulty that you're going through. But there is no,
Right.
that's wrong. You're wrong. You can't do this. It's not
Sure.
okay in the eyes of the Lord. And I don't know. I'm not standing there in the situation to talk to a person. But in this particular situation, I felt so good because I was like, man, the Lord did the work there. I didn't have to go talk to the guy and tell him, you guys need to get married. He just like came back and knew. So,
Well, see, and that's much better. I mean, when the Lord is doing the convicting,
yeah, how are you going to argue with that?
and leading the person, I mean, that's best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it easier for everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Well, let's see here. Let's return back to the page. And that is pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about there was the 5 or whatever, what it was, 5 or 18 or 33 people. And that is, I just wanted to kind of touch on that just for a second, because that's one of those things too where, that is one of the cautions that I think that you should make. You are attaching yourself, to other people in a spiritual way, and in a physical way. And there are memories being formed. There are, I have heard different things about the transfer of even chemicals between peoples that integrate themselves into one another. In church, you may have heard, the expressions about soul ties, and things like that. And I think that if people don't go through a real process of repentance and of seeking the Lord for healing and for restoration, then I think that that really is a real danger and a real potential for people to carry in, a bunch of weight and a bunch of baggage from previous relationships and previous partners into another one, that you can lose, sort of the thing that is so special about sharing your heart and your body, with another person that you would want for, a marriage night type of situation. But again, none of this is beyond the Lord's ability to heal. No tie is, beyond the Lord's ability to sever. No bond is, beyond his ability to break. He can set anybody free from anything. And even if you have, made horrible, bad decisions in your past, and maybe you never really sought reconciliation with the Lord in those things. Maybe you never really went through a full process of repentance and healing, and you have moved into a marriage situation. That is something that you should probably, have a conversation with your spouse about, or maybe if you're not at that place where you can do that, have a conversation with the Lord. But, there is healing to be had there from, anybody who has ventured into any kind of sexual immorality, and there is restoration that can happen, but you need to earnestly seek it from the Lord. But just like I believe that he can heal any other thing that's going on with anybody, he can heal the brokenness that comes from, sexual immorality as well.
This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. Genesis 2:23 and 24 is the last thing on the page for the teens. Wow. Well, thank you, Teen Study Bible, for everything that you've done for us.
Yeah.
In our lives and for this show. And
I'm surprised how well this went, actually. This really could turn into a nice little segment.
Hope so. It's something to go off of at least.
Yeah.
And certainly there are parts of this topic that we did not get to, that we did not sort of prepare for. Much of this was an experiment in letting our 90s teen selves, well, I was not a teen in the 90s, but our 90s selves who were brought up with the Teen Study Bible, sort of explore how our childhood primary texts have affected us, how they brought us up in the way we should go, and perhaps how we've changed since then, in the same way that culture will and does change in the course of 30 years, Christopher. 3 decades. Incredible.
That is the staggering part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a
gosh.
little much to fully comprehend all at once, but I think we are on to something. I think Ravel, this podcast, certainly carries the characteristics that perhaps were instilled in us long ago by the Teen Study Bible, and again later on the Extreme Teen Study Bible, which I don't know. I think is going to take a little bit of time for me to recover from that realization. So hopefully, fellow millennials out there, this was fun for you. Perhaps. I'm curious. Send us an email. Let us know what this experience was like for you, because it was honestly a mix between fun and traumatizing for me. And for those who perhaps did not have any contact with the Teen Study Bible, perhaps you are a baby boomer, one of those baby boomers who purchased the Teen Study Bible for your teen in the 90s, and perhaps this is the first time you're hearing of its contents. I could see it was definitely a successful marketing product to put together for the church in general in the 90s, and Zondervan has an incredible role being played in the spiritual lives of entire generations. throughout the decades, and I hope that they fully appreciate that responsibility that they have received. You know, Zondervan's not even like really a Christian company, isn't it?
No, yeah,
No.
I've actually heard some people go in depth about their, conspiring to upend the gospel.
Oh, there are definitely conspiracy theories abound. But like I said, that is a big responsibility, and I just hope that they take it seriously.
Yeah.
And
I do just want to say that you had talked about emails. We were talking before the show. We've been seeing some increased activity there in the email account. So we do appreciate the engagement from everyone, and the just kind of encouragement and the questions that are coming in, and getting a lot of really interesting questions. So some more content for future episodes. We might have to increase the frequency with which we engage with listener questions, because they're going to start piling up really quick at this rate. So not to discourage anyone from sending them, keep them coming. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, to everybody. We'll try to get those answered individually just as quickly as we can. As soon as I get caught up on grading, that will be the next thing that I do. So, and go snuggle with my son too, because that's occupying a lot of my time these days.
You have been fruitful and you have multiplied.
Indeed, I have.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of Ravel. Again, make sure you can send us emails, questions, concerns, or just praise to contact@ravelpodcast.com. Contact@ravelpodcast.com. You can follow us on social media, all stuff like that. Just type in Ravel Podcast and share us with your friends. Do you have a millennial in your life who had a teen study Bible? Well, we're going to be peppering in these episodes. So hopefully you will gain more and more insight into the millennials in your life as you follow us on Ravel through the Teen Study Bible Study. As we have topics such as money and entertainment and self-image, all important things, certainly that hold their importance through the decades. And if you're a Gen Z, hit me up. I want to know if there's a Gen Z version of this and how it affected you. Or perhaps your church happens to have, like a whole box of teen study Bibles from the 90s. I mean, these Gen Zers, man, they love the 90s, which is kind of tripping me out a little bit. Because I remember our generation being super into the 80s, and it seemed like such an ancient time that was fun to sort of replicate and appreciate the aesthetics of. But now the Gen Zers are doing that about the 90s, which is a weird feeling, that is sort of an unreachable, distant time that is entertaining for them to replicate. Anywho, if you're Gen Z, hit us up. Let us know what's going on. Tell me about your generation. I need to understand. We did not even get into all the stats about the generational stats that I had pulled up. Long story short, Gen Zs, they are having less sexual intercourse than any generation before them, which is exactly what they said about millennials during our time. And yet there are, I don't know, other interesting stats, but it seems
that has to do with porn, I think, but any accessibility. But
yes, the idea that actual physical intercourse is not the most pleasurable or the easily accessed experience for this digital generation. So that could be an interesting conversation someday. But not today, because we're done.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of Ravel. Dr. Daddy Christopher Ryan Gates, do you have anything left to say to the fine people out there?
Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing, email us at contact at ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.
Sex isn't a ham sandwich. I'm going to tell that to my wife.